Hi, my name is Brian Bennett, and I'm a former teacher, and now I'm a customer solutions engineer with TechSmith Education. And this is a follow-up webinar to the Alt-C conference held in the UK a few weeks ago. And we're going to focus on flipped learning today. Now, flipped learning is something that's been kind of a trend in the United States over the last couple of years, and from what we understand, it's becoming more of a trend in Britain. And so what we wanted to do is bring you some tips and tricks, best practices, and things to avoid, as well as some technical tips that you can use TechSmith software for to flip your classrooms. Now, I always like to start with a little bit of a cartoon when we get going in these webinars. So if you take a look at this picture, I really want you to think about which teacher are you? Which kind of teacher are you going to be? Do you typically fall in the middle where I usually fell? When students ask complex questions about ideas during class, you don't always have time to dive into those questions. What we should be doing is reaching for that exploration stage and encouraging those deeper thoughts and those deeper questions that our students have during the class time when we can engage and interact with them. Typically, these get pushed off to home when students are left on their own to answer them. We want to bring that back into the classroom by freeing up some of that class time through flipping. And hopefully you're not telling your students that Santa Claus isn't real. We're going to start with some myths about flipped learning. The first big myth is that flipped learning focuses on video to introduce and teach all the content in any given course. Now, in the United States, this has been through math and science for the most part, and there are a lot of great ways to use video to teach those content areas. But when we get into the arts and the humanities and social studies, it's harder to get some of that video content. So there's a few things that we want to talk about. What do you typically use video for? Now, for me, I had a point during the summer when my car lost a lug on its wheel, and I had to fix that. I didn't want to go and spend $100 to pay somebody else to do it, so I went to YouTube and I found a resource. I found a video where somebody showed me how to fix my car. So I saved a ton of money, and that video taught me the little piece of information that I needed to know. And so the first thing is algorithmic or procedural content works really well for video. So if you're a math or a science professor, you want to be showing your students how to go through a step-by-step process that they're going to be using over and over. This can be for introduction, or it can be to help them review that content later in the semester. You also want this to be very short. We don't want to take an entire hour-long lecture and put it into a video. We want to take tiny bits and pieces so your students can go back and say, this is the piece that I need work on, and then they can make the connections on their own after that short reference. Things you want to avoid are abstract ideas. You want to stay away from really flowy ideas. And one thing as a science teacher I always struggled with was teaching my students about the structure of the atom. And again, if you're a science teacher or a science professor, you know that the atom is kind of hard to teach because we don't know what it looks like. That content didn't work so well in video. It ran into more problems than my students had rather than going through some kind of project or some kind of activity in class to model that particular idea. So as you're planning on making some content and putting it onto video, be thinking about those two things. Is this something procedural, very step-by-step, that my students can reference at any point during the semester? And is it really abstract? Because if it's abstract, you want to stay away from it. The second thing that flipped learning kind of has a myth about it is the fact that flipped learning may or may not rely on homework. And this is a huge argument still. If we're making content for our students, the inclination is to have them do it at home. So you have more class time to focus on the engagement, the collaboration, the projects, whatever you might be doing. The problem is, though, if we're offloading all of that content, now we're doubling our school time for our students. So flipped learning, while it can lend itself to homework, it doesn't always have to be homework. And so I really want to caution you against always relying on that outside of class time to engage with those videos. Typically, video is accessible anytime, anywhere. Mobile, desktop, on the train, on the bus, wherever you can get on the internet. So really be open-minded about when your students access that content. The third myth is that the teacher can relax during class. And the thought again around this is if all your content is on video, then students should be able to do what they just do because they're listening to you teach. But again, remember that video is not the same medium as teaching students face-to-face. Your students need that feedback from you. They need you to engage with them. They need you to interact with them. And that means you are walking around and talking with your students every single day, gauging where they are, asking for feedback, giving them feedback, formative assessment constantly during the class. In fact, I wore through shoes much faster when I was using a flipped learning approach than when I was just standing up at the front because I was on my feet all the time. There are other times when I will just park myself next to a student and work with them for 5 or 10 minutes if they really needed help, if they were really struggling with something. And there were times when my administrator would even walk in to do a visit and they couldn't find me in the room because I was sitting with the kids. I was with them in the community, engaging with them. So don't fall into the trap of just relying on the video to teach, because we know that the video can only give us as much as that very initial presentation or that quick review. You are the teacher, you are the expert in that content, and you are there to give context to what your students are learning day to day. The last myth I want to talk about is that flipped learning has been kind of approached as a magic bullet for education. Students and teachers, and especially those outside of education, are saying, this is great, our students can get content anytime, anywhere, but that's really only half the battle. Again, remember, you are that content professional, you are that expert, and you want to be giving them the context for what your students are learning. If they're just learning facts through videos, then we're not really expanding on anything. We're not giving them opportunities to make connections and go beyond what we can do with the class time. So it's not a magic bullet, but it is a very effective way to start to reclaim some of that class time and start to regain some of that lost instruction time and turn it into something engaging, collaborative, and productive. So what is flipped learning? Well, really, when we break it down, flipped learning is using online video to deliver content anywhere, anytime. Another way to think about it is if your classroom is a community, you have 30, 40, 50, however many students are in your class at one time, that is a community time. We want to take direct instruction away from the community space and put it in the individual space. So what do I mean by that? That means that one student might be spending some time looking at some old videos to review. They might be going through some material that they had a hard time with. Another student across the room might be working on some advanced material. They are moving ahead through the content if they happen to get it a little bit easier than others. You might be working with that middle group and helping them move through the content. So it doesn't matter when and where you are ready to give the instruction. It matters when the students are ready to engage with the content at their specific time. So now we really want to shift into some of the tools that you can use to help flip your learning experience for your students. And we're going to start with desktop creation. And what do I mean by desktop creation? I mean things that happen on a PC or on a Mac computer sitting at a desk. And we're going to start with Camtasia. And this is a TechSmith tool that you may have heard about before. It's available on both Mac and PC. And really what it is, it's a full-fledged video editing suite. We have educator pricing, and we allow you to purchase this online, and there are 2 licenses per purchase. So you can buy it and put it on your home computer as well as your work computer. You don't have to lug them back and forth. You can create anytime, anywhere. There's a few things that we want to point out about Camtasia. The first thing is that it records your computer's screen. And when I explain this to people, I say, imagine a video camera over your shoulder watching the screen as you're working. It allows the computer to track what's happening from your mouse movements to windows you have open to any programs you have running, and Camtasia is recording all of this in the background. Then what you can do is take that content and put it into our editor. And the editor allows you to do all sorts of things like cutting up your clips and making short segments around some ideas and making longer segments around others, adding things like callouts and animation and interactivity pieces that we offer through TechSmith software. There are a lot of things that you can do with Camtasia, and this is our full-fledged video production suite that a lot of educators get into once they begin flipping their classrooms. The other great thing is that we allow you to produce your content anywhere. We have our own hosting service, screencast.com, which gives you some interactivity features that you don't get other places, but we don't lock you into our system. We can send it to YouTube. You can even host it on your own server on your school's campus. So we try not to lock you into one particular way, and Camtasia is how we do that. The second piece that we use is called Snagit. And if you imagine Camtasia sitting next to Snagit, Snagit would be the little brother. You can still do some video recording, but Snagit's main use is through image capture, and that's still images. So when you're using Snagit, you're looking at things like capturing screenshots for tutorials or handouts or worksheets or practice sets, things that you want to bring to your students that are web-based, but you need to get them somewhere else, into a presentation even. During this presentation, I have screenshots that I use Snagit for. This is also educator priced, and you can also download it from the internet, and we give you 2 licenses again, so you can create at home or at work or wherever you're most comfortable. There's a few other things. So like I said, Snagit is mainly for image capture. We do give you video capture option, but there is no editing within Snagit. So what would you use Snagit video for? This would be something like doing a simple one-off video. Mine was mostly to show students how to log into our LMS. I knew I didn't want to edit it, and I knew it was going to be short. So I use Snagit to capture that piece of information, and then again, I can share it anywhere. You can share it to TechSmith service, screencast.com, or you can put it on YouTube or another offsite server, depending on what your setup is. Image editing is a little bit more powerful. There's a lot of drawing and annotation you can do on top of still images, and we even allow you to combine multiple images into one for any kind of instruction series. If you want to do a photo collage, the Snagit image editor is really powerful. It's that flip side of the coin to Camtasia's video editor. And then again, you can share those images anywhere. We even have FTP outputs to things like Facebook and Twitter. You can send these images up to Flickr if you use that as your photo site. So again, giving you options for powerful image editing and quick video production through our desktop tools. Now, when you're recording on your desktop, we also suggest using some kind of input mechanism to interact with that content. And these are things like Wacom tablets. And what these are, they are plug-in interfaces, and they give you a big mouse pad and a pen that interacts with that. So if you've ever seen YouTube videos where somebody is writing on a screen, they're not doing that with the mouse. They're probably using some kind of pen tablet. On top of a PowerPoint, if you're on Microsoft, there's a built-in pen function within the present model. And you can use that to annotate on top of PowerPoint slides. So you don't need to take your content and turn it into something else. Just take whatever you have ready and then use the built-in pen option. Now, there's one thing I do want to mention. On a PC, those annotations are saved from slide to slide. If you're working on a Mac, those annotations are lost from slide to slide. So be aware of what you're doing and which platform you're on, and make sure you try it out before you go to produce it to save yourself a headache down the road. If you have PDFs, I did all of mine through PDF because it was a simple file format. My students could download it and print it themselves. There are a few tools you can use. The one I prefer to use is called Jarnal, and that's an open source PDF editor, and it opens up on your machine, and you open up a PDF through that, and it gives you editing rights, and you can create annotations and markings, and they have all kinds of different pen colors that you can use to give notes just like you would on a whiteboard. And the great thing about that is that I can save it out as an annotated PDF in case a student lost their note packet at the end of the semester. They could go back, get all those notes without having to watch all of the content over again. Thirdly, there's some whiteboarding apps. I always liked having some white space so I could do diagrams or doodles while I was talking to my students through the video. On Mac, there's a great program called Sketchbook Express. It's a free download, and it gives you a big white space and all kinds of drawing tools and pens so that if you're a very visual person, if you're a visual communicator, this is a great way to get some of that visual media into your content without having to go through the construct of a PowerPoint. So this, again, something optional, not necessary at all, but it's a great way to help expand what your video is conveying to your students to help hit some of those learning styles that your students may have. There's another one that's web-based called a web whiteboard, and it's aww.com. And if you run to that, you can use a web-based whiteboard. There's no download, and it works just great. And it's just another option out there for you to help expand that media during your content. We want to shift over to mobile now because mobile learning is becoming very, very popular. 99% of my students had access to some kind of Android or iOS device that they could get online with to either consume content, but now they can also begin to create their own content. TechSmith has a couple programs called Ask3 and ScreenChomp. And you may have heard about these before, but they're simple whiteboarding apps. And when you open it up on your iPad, they give you a white space and you use your finger to draw on top of them and annotate as you're going. So I would be doing a lesson right on my whiteboard. These are quick videos. They're not edited in any way, and they're just sent to the students as they're needed. On the other hand, if your students have iPads, they can open up these programs, do their own assessment, do their own diagramming, their own teaching, and then send it up to the class. So you get the peer-to-peer learning in a very quick format. If you're using Ask3, this is a free download and it is a closed system. That means you can't get your videos out of the app yet, but it's great because if you as the teacher download it, you get a class code and all of your students can log in, and then all of that happens within your closed ecosystem. ScreenChomp, on the other hand, gives you the option to save your video and then you can export it to some other service if you want it to be outside of that platform. The other thing that we offer, this is fairly new from TechSmith, is the closed feedback loop that Ask3 offers you. So you can see that when you sign up, you create a profile. Anybody in the class can create content, and you can also comment on each other's content in a rolling discussion format on the video where that confusion happens. And this is meant to build teamwork and collaboration within a class, and we want to make it easy for you to do that. Our other mobile piece is called Coach's Eye, and this one is for iOS and Android, and this is found in both of those app stores. In Coach's Eye, it's meant to bring live video and annotation to anybody's mobile device. So if you're out walking, and I'm a science teacher, and I've mentioned that a couple times, but sometimes I'll see something that's, hey, that's just great, I want to show that to my students. I'll pull out my phone and I'll take a quick video with Coach's Eye. What I can then do is annotate on top of that using just some simple drawing tools and voice narration to highlight certain areas, to replay different things, to zoom in, to show how or what's going on in the video for my students to consume later. Coach's Eye then lets you share it within the Coach's Eye system, or you can send these by email or up to YouTube. Again, we want you to be able to create and show what you know and get it to your audience as easily as possible. So TechSmith has all kinds of systems, all kinds of desktop as well as mobile applications to help you share what you know and help your students share what they know with you. We hope you've enjoyed this webinar, and we thank you for taking time to join us today. So Stuart was just talking about how his students are more able to carry out their third-year dissertations, right? So if you want to pick kind of back up and just give that end half piece again in case people missed it.
Yeah, sure. So because of the students taking more control of their learning, and the learning's being sort of, the sessions being more, here's a question, here's your equipment, here's your sort of facilities to actually undertake those, they've kind of developed these skills to actually be given these scenarios, or even developing these scenarios and these rationales for these questions themselves, and producing these methodologies that allow them to actually ultimately answer the questions, effectively undergoing the scientific process from day one, from the start to the finish. And as a result, that's helped them massively in the final year dissertations, where being half their final year, being a big sort of experimental piece of research, that's what they have to do. And previously, we were getting students into final year with very little experience on that scientific process, whereas now our first years are even able to do it. So within our first year labs, we give them a very simple 1 or 2 line question, go, here's that piece of equipment. And without giving them any guidance in terms of using that equipment, we give them the ability to play, understand that equipment, and then ultimately answer that question that was given to them. And that's something that they've been able to take forward to their second and ultimately their third year, to help them massively in the future modules.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be my next question. So is there any training process that you put your students through as they get into the class, or is it really do you set expectations? How do you train your students to think in this way?
Well, it was challenging for me as a member of staff, and I went all in. So on our first year lab, when they come in, and this is after the first lecture, but within the first lecture we just give an overview of what biomechanics is, so no theory at all. And they walk into the first lab and we give them a force plate to allow to measure ground reaction forces, so the forces we apply to the floor. We give them a question. So, for example, how does the angle of takeoff of a jump affect the maximal forces experienced in different directions? And we don't give them any sort of information about what the force plates actually measure or anything like that. We just tell them, look, click this button, it will start recording. You stop by pressing this button. If you press F3, you get the maximal values. We don't tell them what direction they're in or anything like that. And then we basically give them time to play with it, try and work out what the 3 lines on the output are, what they actually refer to. And then from that, they can slowly start developing that understanding of what a force plate actually measures, and they obviously know what jumping is, so then they can jump at different angles and see how that affects it. And then from that, they start understanding of directional forces that we apply to the floor, and how the resultant force is broken up into the three directions, the vertical, forwards, backwards, left and right directions as well. So we basically just give them time to solve problems themselves and be given a piece of equipment. They obviously know where the help files are if they want to sort of get a bit more in depth, but we're there to answer questions, or normally we ask questions back to them instead of giving them specific answers, just to help guide them more. But it really is just let them play with it and see what happens.
And how have the students taken to that?
When I started this with the second years, because obviously they'd gone through the old style of doing the first year, and they were a little bit hesitant, they were a little bit slow in terms of, am I actually allowed to do this? Is there no guidelines? Are you not going to tell me? Why are you sitting down just watching me? And they took a while, but then after a while they're like, oh, I'm actually allowed to sort of play with it. I'm not sort of fixated, I'm not sort of caged in by these certain guidelines that I've got to follow step by step. And the first years are fine because they come on, they don't know any better. They think that that's what university education is. So they expect something different to what they had before because it's a different level. So they don't have any sort of expectations, so to say.
Now, earlier you said that you're not quite where you want to be yet. So what does that mean? What is your golden egg?
I've only been doing this for like 3 or 4 years now, this style of teaching, and I've also been finishing my PhD in my own time, which has taken up a lot of the time that I've wanted. So my golden egg is sort of having online sort of tutorials and videos, whether they're short videos, a combination of what we call the shorter videos, and then the longer videos we label as sort of like keynote lectures to make them sound a bit more important and sort of conference-like. But then at the same time of having a battery of online formative assessments, so just little quizzes, multiple choice quizzes that students can take any number of time they want after watching a video to check that they've got the understanding that's required. I want to be able to also get online discussion forums going with students away from it, in terms of, oh, we've got this lab coming up, we're working on this question, what do we want to put together, so that then when they get to it, they've already discussed the sort of basic methodology that they're going to be going with, so that then they can spend more time when they have access to the equipment to actually use the equipment, as opposed to necessarily just planning, which hopefully we can do backstage with that. And then also having just a scenario of short videos linked to each of the different parts of equipment, because we also have iPads now. Our department have invested in them which is quite good. So hopefully, like sort of having a scenario of short videos there, if they want to learn how to use a bit of equipment, they can just pick up the iPad and just sort of click on that video, and then it's already there for them in class, as opposed to me telling the same story over and over again. They can then just click through to a certain section that they require. So it's more of the overall mindset that I'm looking at in terms of connecting every single stage of the process.
Has this started to spread out into the university, or are you still kind of a lone duck in your department?
We hired a couple of new members of staff who, because I was initially the only biomechanist up to last summer, and then a few more came on board, and because I'd already implemented these changes, I was like, look, this is how we're going to do it. There's a little bit of hesitancy. They're a little bit sort of, well, this is how I've done it before. Why can't we do it this way? And I was like, just give it a go. Let me take the brunt. If it doesn't work, although I knew it had because we've done it before, if it doesn't work, then I'll take the brunt of anybody that fails or anything like that. But after the first sort of session that they had, they're like, students are actually doing really well. And I've had another member of staff first year, I did this walk into my lab, and he was just amazed at how sort of proactive the students were within the lab. And I was just sort of just walking around, just watching them, because there wasn't anything to do because they're all taking control themselves. And it slowly ventured out, and we've actually got another member of staff who started doing her DProf linked to this style of teaching as well, within her research area. So it's starting to get out there within our department, and I think off that it's starting to filter out a little bit throughout the university as well.
So one thing, especially when I started this, there are some ideas that I had that just failed miserably. I had this great idea, and I was expecting my students to go off and take control of it. And has anything like that happened? And if so, how do you kind of bounce back from that?
I think the hardest thing for me to as in terms of ideas and things to get working, is the discussion away from classes. It's all well and good getting students to watch videos or even read research articles, but it's the getting the discussion away from it, because I think no one wants to be seen to be taking the lead on it and sort of being that, for want of a better word, the geek of the class, shall we say. So I was having, and I've tried doing this with using the discussion forum on our Blackboard system, which wasn't overly good, and then also going a bit towards Twitter as well, just to keep it short and concise. And that slowly hadn't really picked off. And as I contacted the class rep, our year group rep, and sort of started discussing with him and sort of asked him a huge favour of, can he just be that person who leads from the front, shall we say, and start getting things going. And then off that, he sort of got a couple of the others involved, and then other people saw him getting involved, and it slowly sort of snowballed, although it wasn't as great as I want it to be. So the offline discussions away from class is something that I'm struggling with, and I'm trying lots of different methods, but it is, I think, the hardest thing to get the students engaged in.
Do you think that's a cultural thing rather than a procedural?
I think so. I think it involves them being proactive, and it involves them putting themselves out into the sort of the public space, shall we say, in terms of their class peers, as opposed to doing the extra work, watching something, reading something they can do in their own time. They don't get sort of seen doing it, shall we say. So I think it's more of that, a bit of the timidness, and they don't want to be seen to be public speaking, shall we say.
Has this made your job easier?
In the classroom and overall prepping for the classroom, yes. It's a lot less stressful. I don't have to worry about filling a 1 hour lecture with a 1 hour lecture. I don't have to worry about making sure all the guidelines are exact and follow the exact procedure in terms of how to use the equipment and step-by-step phases. There are times when the lab that I prepare, I write 3 lines, and that is 3 separate questions. And then the rest of it, the students do themselves. So it allows me more time to focus on what do I want them to gain from the lectures, from the lab sessions, what do I want them to understand by the end of it, as opposed to going, what is the material that I'm going to present to them? So it allows me more to focus on the overall conceptual understanding that I want the students to gain from it.
Sorry. Do you think you would ever, reach a point where you would switch back to your previous methods?
Saying that, I mean, I do still give the odd lectures, sort of old style lectures, especially when I'm talking more about telling a story, shall we say, in terms of the big keynote lectures. So if there's something that is a lot better put together as a larger picture, so making it more like a documentary, should we say, instead of going through the hard theory. If we're talking about a specific applied setting, like previously, one example is looking at the biomechanics of long distance running, which is something that's predominantly thought to be more physiology based. So I kind of like taking them from when we started walking bipedally in our ancestors, all the way to the modern day. So it's kind of been more of a documentary type lecture as opposed to a tutorial type lecture.
I guess maybe a better way to phrase the question would be, do you feel like now doing kind of the blended style, flip style, your class is more effective than it was?
Yeah, definitely. More is taken from it. I've also, the assessments have changed as well, because we've obviously, assessments good or bad is a different debate entirely, but we've got to come out with a grade at the end for these students, a level for them, and the assessments have changed more from a fact base to a conceptual understanding. So it's more either presentations, lectures, lab reports. It's more about discussion as opposed to list what the 3 Newton's laws of motions are, for example. It's more about the conceptual understanding, the application of them, as opposed to just the hard facts.
Now, before we start to look back at the discussion forum and pull questions from that, I'm assuming a lot of people watching are kind of interested in getting their feet wet or, jumping in fully, kind of like you and I both did. What's a good place to start?
I think there's 1 or 2 options. I mean, for me, I started in removing a lecture, should we say, and just sort of going, okay, I'm going to talk for 10, 15 minutes, give them the hard facts behind it, and then give them a question, a scenario. to then apply those that theory, those facts to that scenario. And then I randomly sort of selected small groups to present as well their findings within a 30-second speech. And I think that's a fairly good way, because you still have quite control over it within the classroom, and you can still focus on a lot of the key information. Another way is just start making small revision type videos for the students, and get them sort of going, okay, if you, within this lecture, if you didn't understand this bit, this is the video you want to go and see, or this is the information you want to resource, and slowly build up that way. So you're not relying on it per se for the actual teaching structure of it. You're using it to support what you're already doing. I think that's a very easy way to get into it. Obviously, if you can make the videos easy, is the hardest issue for people who haven't made videos before. But I think that's a fairly straightforward way, just making those videos to actually support what you're doing. And then you'll slowly build up this battery of resources, and you can kind of like just completely go for it.
Mm-hmm. What's a mistake you would want people to avoid?
I probably think that going all in off the get-go.
Even though that's what you did, right?
Well, I was forced to.
Okay.
I didn't have a lab, and I wasn't going to lecture every week for the whole module.
Sure.
I'd probably send them to sleep. So I'd probably do it bit by bit and slowly build up that resource of information that you have, because then you kind of get an understanding of what you need. And if you're planning it from day one during the summer months, which most of us do plan the subsequent year from, and you forget something, that building block could make everything fall down. So it's easier to get those blocks as you go through the year and develop them, so that then in the subsequent year you're ready to go. I think that's probably, in retrospect, that's probably what I'd probably recommend going forward most.
You just mentioned the planning phase. Now, one thing, and you keep bringing up all these new questions. So one thing that at least teachers in the United States struggle with is that they feel like they need to create an entirely new curriculum. Did you start by scrapping all of your old materials and starting from new, or was it more of a revision process and kind of a rolling accumulation of stuff?
I think my biggest thing was changing the emphasis of what I wanted the students to get from it. Because beforehand, when I started lecturing, I was more worried about, they know this fact, they know this fact, they know this fact. And then I started sort of changing that and sort of going more about the conceptual understanding and going, okay, yep, as long as they are more focused on them understanding what they're talking about, as opposed to being able to recite it word for word. So I don't necessarily care if our first years can actually recite the equations for projectile motions, as long as they're able to apply them to a certain situation. When they have them, I mean, they can just pull out their phone and get them from the internet or a textbook. Being able to remember them off the top of their head doesn't make them a good biomechanist. What makes them a good biomechanist is being able to use them. And that's how I changed my teaching style within the class as well, in terms of focusing more on what is the end result, what's the application of these processes, as opposed to what are the processes that we're trying to use. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I kind of went off a bit.
No, that's an interesting way to talk about it. And it's not something that I've really verbalized that way, shifting your goals from, I was a chemistry teacher, so knowing your 5 gas laws, and I shifted from being able to recite those into, what does it actually mean when those are applied in different situations. So yeah. Now you're on Twitter, and that's how you and I connected. We've never met face to face, but is there somewhere that people watching can go, and I've got your contact information, we'll show them, but do you have a website or do you have YouTube videos? Is there somewhere they can see some of the things that you've done?
Well, at the moment, all of our videos actually are on our internal system. It's this year that I'm slowly that's my next step, getting it more accessible outside of the university system, so that students can not only see stuff that isn't necessarily in their modules, but students coming towards to the university can still have access to them, see what it's all about. Students who have then graduated can still access them. So this is something where I'm nowhere near where I want to be in terms of having that online resource external to our university intranet. I do have a website which is kind of like taking a back seat at the moment, because I'm coming to the last stages of my PhD. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of like a place where, again, I just thought, why not? I'll see what happens. And I just use that just purely for reflection, just writing my own experiences. And that's something I'd recommend as well for people changing their teaching strategy and teaching style, in the sense of having somewhere where they can reflect. And it's all well and good thinking about it, but putting it down in writing, you actually have to formulate your ideas and your thoughts and your opinions. And I found that massively beneficial, and putting it out into the public space means that I've got to almost make sure it's exactly what I do feel and what I do view to be correct in terms of my philosophy. So I'd highly recommend that. But in terms of like videos availability, I'm more than happy if people are interested, because as I said, a lot of the videos that we use are actually already on YouTube and Vimeo and things like that we haven't actually made. They've been made by other lecturers from other institutes, especially within the statistics side of things within my research methods. A lecturer down in Australia actually got a massive fund to produce these videos, these animated videos, explaining all about different phases of statistics. So if people are interested in them, I'm more than happy for them to contact me via email or through Twitter, and I'll point them in the direction.
Great. So I'm going to switch gears for a minute. Thank you so much for taking time.
No
You're welcome to hang out on the call. But again, this is Stuart Miller, Senior Lecturer of Biomechanics at Middlesex University, and I've got his contact information that we'll show you in just a second. So if you're interested in getting in touch with TechSmith or getting in touch, finding some help content, tutorials, things like that for TechSmith, you're welcome to send me an email. My email address is shown here on the screen. Again, I said it earlier in the webinar that my job is Customer Solutions Engineer, and that's a really fancy way to say I want to make teachers successful. So if you're having problems with our software, surely you can send me an email. But really, I'm here to make sure that you're successful in whatever you're doing with digital teaching and learning. And I've got that experience as well, starting as a lecturer and moving more into the facilitator, like Stuart said. So feel free to send me an email. You can find more information about TechSmith at techsmith.com. We've got, and I'll show you our help files there if you're a TechSmith user already, if you grab some of our software at a conference or online. We've got a huge bank of tutorials and help videos. So let me jump to that real quick, and then I'll come back to this content. So when you go to techsmith.com, you'll see our landing page. We've got some ads at the top, but under the help in the top, and then there's a tutorials button. If you click on that, you can choose your tool, whatever product you're using. We've got PC, Mac, and so we'll click on tutorials for Camtasia Studio. And you can see we're sorted here by things like just how to get started, editing tools, audio tools, captioning even. So we've got a lot of content here for you to pull from as you're getting started with creating some of this digital content. And this is all free to use. And you don't even have to own TechSmith software to use these resources. So you can head on over to techsmith.com and you can find more information there. So again, here's the contact information. So Stuart's email address is there, s.miller@mdx.ac.uk. And again, he's more than willing to take any questions that you might have specifically, any feedback that you've got, anything you're trying to find that you're just having a hard time tracking down. And I think that's going to wrap it up. We do have a couple questions, so hang on one sec.
Have students' views been collected at all, and do they prefer the flip map?
Okay, so Stuart, were you able to hear that?
Yep. Sort of feedback from the students.
Yeah. So what's their feedback, and are you able to track how many times they've viewed your content?
Yeah, we sort of there's something that we have a lot more access in terms of with our new online learning area. Previously, we could track the overall downloads. Now we can track it per student. We can even see sort of how long they've been watching the video for. So have they actually watched all the video, or just clicked on it and then forgotten about it? But something I always do is I'm constantly getting feedback from the students through normally just questionnaires. Anonymous questionnaires. And one of the questions that I sort of asked at the end of last year, I think it was, or the year before, sorry, because we just started a new year now. So 2 years ago, at the end of that year group, I asked along the lines of, what would you like more of, lectures or labs? And all of them, every single one of them said more labs. And asking why, it was more based on the actual processes that they were given free realm to do, and to go through the processes themselves and sort of speed it up as they saw fit, or slow it down as they saw fit, to focus on specific areas. And then with the online videos, every single student wanted them. They wanted they preferred what I called the live lectures with me standing in front of it as opposed to just the screen capture. I think screen capture is great for the shorter videos, but if you get anything sort of 20 minutes upwards, 15, 20 minutes upwards, it gets a little bit boring just looking at something on a screen. And making an animated video for that length of time is a bit sort of time consuming as well. So if you are going to go for the longer videos, do try and make sure it's more of a live camcorder in front of a live lecture, so to say. So you actually see the individual person presenting, so you get their mannerisms, their body behavior, their sort of gestures, that kind of thing. But then for the shorter videos, the sort of screen capture or stuff that you use with the iPad is perfect for that. So yeah, I'm always sort of slowly getting feedback from the students. In terms of, we also get, what's really nice is it comes up at Board of Studies as well, which is more of the university formal process of student feedback. And unfortunately for other members of staff, the constant one is they want videos for every lecture, every module. So it's slowly being sort of forced upon other members of staff, should we say, unfortunately for them.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I mean, even that's something that my students gave me feedback on, is that they liked to see me, so I did mostly screen capture, but I would always make sure my webcam was on, because we interact in class and there's a lot of communication that happens that's body language, and so they want to be able to see that. We had another question come up that I think was about personal devices. Do you...
Personal development sessions and like self-awareness, like can this process be used or something like that?
Did you catch that?
I didn't know.
Can this approach be used for personal development sessions? Example, self-awareness?
So
Like
sounds like professional development ideas. Do you...
I haven't done it sort of, should we say, formally for that. But then at the same time, the students, I don't know if this is centered on that sort of same topic, but the students do tend to be more confident with themselves working in the groups. They seem to be more confident when they're doing presentations in front of larger groups, and sort of more able to ask questions and more willing to ask questions. And that's the biggest hurdle that a lot of students that I've come up against with a lot of students, is they don't want to ask questions. They seem to think that if they ask questions or they don't know an answer, then it's not good. They're going to fail immediately. Whereas that's all part of the learning curve. And getting them over that hurdle has been the biggest thing for me, just getting them more confident in terms of going, okay, I don't actually know this. Let's solve this problem ourselves. And that's been the biggest thing for me in terms of, I've seen massive changes in students' behavior, as opposed to not just their understanding of the area, but more in terms of just their general behavior.
So you feel like you have to teach them, or that they have to gain the confidence to be okay to say, we don't know, but...
I think it's a case of constantly allowing them to feel comfortable in doing so, and asking them questions and sort of receiving their questions and bouncing ideas backwards and forwards and getting discussion going with them. So trying to sort of feed out different ideas, go, okay, why? And if they get the wrong answer, ask them, why did they think that? And then you get the processes, and then you go, okay, yep, up to this point you're sort of bang on. This is where you went slightly astray, so this is sort of, try this approach, how does that work? And get them solving the problems themselves, but guiding them. So giving them a little bit of navigation. And there's times when you do have to give them more specific navigation as opposed to the general point over there type navigation. But then it's important not to focus on that too much, and sort of, when they are back on the right path, step back a little bit more and give them a little bit more freedom. I think it's just a guidance process, really.
Yeah, so that idea of checking along constantly. Do you feel like you, because I remember when I was teaching, sometimes I'd have this huge surprise where I thought a student was on track, with learning the content, and then there's a huge gap in that kind of exam or something. Do you feel like that happens less frequently, as frequently, or?
I think it's for now it's because they're not focused on the specific facts or the specific theories, and they've got to understand the whole area, should we say,
Sure.
to actually get to the end point. I'm seeing more of a greater understanding of the overall topic as such, as opposed to, I know this fact, but I don't know this fact. And whereas, instead of going, okay, giving them individual building blocks to then piece together for the overall picture, I'm kind of giving them the overall picture, and then as they get more comfortable with that, they slowly piece the building blocks together, and sort of understand each separate section of that from the overall conceptual understanding.
Sure. I think
Yeah, one person was kind of asking just like for personal development. I mean, like being a better speaker in front of the camera, or developing, I guess, some of the things like employment skills, like.
Okay.
So kind of for yourself, doing this.
Oh, for me.
Yeah, personally, how has it helped you?
Oh, massively. The first time I recorded a lecture, whilst I was actually in the lecture as soon as I started talking, I was conscious that my voice was being recorded. So I had to be a lot more clear. I had to be a lot more concise. I couldn't babble as much, although I've probably got over that and I've gone backwards. So that was one thing. And then playing it back, listening to myself, you sort of pick up all your errors in terms of sort of annoying habits. And then the next big thing was when I started doing video camcorder, so actually live capturing the lectures and seeing myself. And the biggest thing immediately I noticed that I was walking around everywhere. I was just walking left and right, forwards, backwards. I was very distracting. So on the next lecture, I immediately just sort of stopped that. I made sure that, yes, I did sort of move around the front of the room if I was presenting the lecture as a lecture style, but I didn't do it a lot, and I sort of stayed in the same spot. And the second lecture I gave on camcorder, I watched it back and I was actually learning from myself. I was like, I didn't actually know that. Didn't actually know I knew that. And you sort of start getting an understanding of how you are as a presenter, how you are as a talker. And then in terms of interacting with the students, you have to take a step back in terms of seeing it from behind your shoulder. So am I helping them too much? Am I sort of interacting with them? Am I guiding them effectively? Because you're going a bit more off piece and you're not as structured, you get a greater understanding as to how you are interacting with the student, because how you interact with them within the session is key to how they're developing. And you sort of get that immediate feedback in terms of what's working and what isn't working for you as a facilitator, as a teacher. So I think, yeah, massively it's helped me personally.
Great. Well, that's been about an hour. So we're going to, again, thank you so much for your time this afternoon for you, this morning for us. Again, this whole webinar was recorded, so we'll be able to, if you had viewing issues or we cut out in the middle there, we'll be able to go back and clean up this a little bit, and we'll send you an email again with the email you registered with, so you can come back, watch this one more time. And in that email, we'll include Stuart's contact address, his email address, his Twitter handle, TechSmith contact information, things like that, because we want to stay in touch. So thank you, everybody, for taking time this afternoon to be with us. And again, Stuart, thank you again. This was extremely beneficial for me to just learn a little bit more about what you do. And we hope we can work together with you again sometime in the future.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I mean, it's another learning curve for me. I mean, it sort of forces me to put everything into place, into structure as well. So it's always good reflecting.
Yeah. So thanks again, everyone. And we will see you next time.